Okay, welcome back. In this session, we're going to learn about installation of SCCM server. Before we just continue, we can revise what we have learned so that you can easily understand what what we are gonna talk in the as part of the installation. In fact, okay. So the first step would be what we have learned is we learned about the vocabulary. Okay, we also learned about there's something called roles will be there. Okay, so like MP, DP, these are actually 17 different roles at this point of time, I can say. Okay, and we also talked about a scaling of the servers, like the server types, like when you install the while doing the installation, you have CAS as a top level, and which will have sunflower model, in fact, right, what we have discussed, and that can have a child as a primary can have a child as a secondary, but secondary cannot have a child, right? So secondary where you can deploy is very limited machines, if you have, or if you don't have you can't afford for the secondary server, you can go for the remote content management service, so that the clients will take the content from there, and then it gets works for the client activity will be done, right? So similarly, we also talked about the CAS is the central. We talked like this primary side and the secondary side does not support the child sides. We talked about it, and the roles. Coming to the roles, some of the roles are very key. Some of them where we can enable, where we can't enable. We talked about it. And also client number of sites hierarchy, that's a scaling side. We are going to talk, if you are not seeing these wizards, I'm sorry, if you're not seeing these slides, definitely I'm going to talk on it. Okay, in fact I'm going to add some more stuff also to these critical slides, which we are going to talk later point. Okay, for now, at least we have some idea. For installation, we need to have any of these server operating systems, and then we can install any of these side like CAS, primary, secondary. In fact, we are using 2019 latest server, and then we're going to install the SCCM server. Just for a side note, on 2008 R2 with SP1, you don't have no longer supported, in fact. Okay, this is no longer supported, but it can supported only the distribution point with the limited flexibility on operating system deployment also. Okay, and these are the highest CPUs which can be used, I mean, for the hardware scaling, right? Also for the primary side or the secondary side, we can use these or the database configurations. So we're going to talk on that, but in our lab what we have done is we chosen as the 4 core processor with 8 to 12 GB of RAM with the more than 100 GB of the in fact the space, right? So SQL Server, yes, it can be done. We have talked about the SQL Server a little bit, and especially you can install any of these versions starting from 2012 to 2007. Any of the versions are supported. However, 2017 must be a CU2 as a minimum, otherwise it can't support. If it is 2012 or 2014, 2016, till the latest version of 1803 or 1809, it supports. Okay, we are going to use 1803. Right, and these are the versions which are ending with the express, starting from 2012 to 2017, supports for only secondary side, not for the primary or the secondary, sorry, not for the primary and the CAS, but it also supports for the secondary side. Okay, that's what the conclusion what we have learned. And while installation of the SQL Server, we also concentrated on the location, that's a co-location, we call it a co-location, collation, which is a SQL Latin 1 General PC1 CIS, which I have already shown that. And also the authentication mode must be Windows authentication, and we also set the 8 GB of the minimum minimum RAM. Still it was not taking up. That could be one of the bug, but we are sure that what we have configured is correct. and also SQL Service best practices. We'll talk on this. We're gonna get an error while remembering. If you remember, while installation of the SQL Server, we need to allow some of the ports and Windows Firewall, especially 4022 and 1433, which is a default SQL Server port. That we have not created any of the Windows firewall rule. So we're gonna do that while installation. That's gonna come up in a minute. Also for the pre-request, what all the things we have done, we can see here the log file. We also have the schema extended by using ext extend ad sch schema. So with this we enable the system management container. Under that, all these values got populated, but we can't see in fact, right? So once we install the SCCM server, we can see some of them, okay, honestly, but SCCM client can view it to publish that values by SCCM server. We also added the systems management container properties, the permissions also granted, right? So here system management container got created by in the Active Directory. Then we also granted the permissions here, right? And also what we have done is we also installed here the pre-request, and while doing the installation of the pre-request checks, basically it's not the installation, but it also created a log on the C drive, and we are able to open with CM Trace as a tool, and everything got passed. Initially, if you look at lot of errors, but now if you see here, a lot of errors are there, right? All these are errors which are showing in the red. We fixed each of them, like IIS, RDC, and SQL Server, WSUS. All of them got installed, even .NET Framework. All of them got passed out, and now it looks good. Now the next step would be the installing SCCM server. Let's go to the C drive, and we have the media as 1802 here. I go to the splash.hta, which is the file for doing the setup. As part of the setup, it will ask for to download the latest updates from the Microsoft site. So we did even download it in the previous video, like by clicking this, and we have shown the folder called pre folder. If you remember, this folder we have shown, and it has downloaded all the required files. We can see here the 56 files. So all of them got installed, which includes your SQL Server Express Edition. For example, this is the SQL Express Edition. Like this latest updates, all of them will be available, which is close to 1 GB, right? So let's continue further to the install. When I decided I wanted to install a SCCM server, I should be sure that what I'm going to install. So what I'm going to install is a site, right? So definitely what kind of site I'm going to install is a key here. So whether I'm going to install as a cache or a primary site or a secondary server, or the secondary site, or just for the content server. So in my case, since I'm using a media, not definitely this, so I'm going to use either cache or primary, not the secondary even, right? Because the secondary sites can be pushed from primary site, not from the content, okay, not from media. So either I have only two options. So in this lab, I'm gonna since it's a basic starting lab, okay, post to this I'm gonna show you in a matured real production labs also. There I'm gonna show you cache and the primaries, multiple primaries, and the secondaries, and the syncing upgrade. All of them can be covered, but for now, just to understand for the beginners starting point, I'm going to show you as a primary, as a standalone site. I hope you remember that the vocabulary which we covered here, cache as the primary and the standalone primary. There's no difference between the standalone primary and the primary. Both are the same type, but standalone means it doesn't report to a central administration site. Later point, if you decided, or if your company is merged with another company, you want to migrate, you want to point this standalone primary to any of the cache site, yes, you can do that. Okay, so let's go here and click on that splash here and the install. When I do the click on install, it's popping up there. See, next it says that, hey, I'm going to install the primary site. Yes, you're going to install the primary site. Let's next. And do you have a CD key? If you have the CD key, you can enter, but in my case, I'm going to use the evolution. Okay, and click on next. This is the software residence. that's okay. If you don't have the software reference, or if you have that, you can choose it. Click on next. These are the license agreements which you need to accept for Silverlight or the SQL Express Edition or native client. It in advance it is prompting you, so you need to accept that by reviewing. This is where the step, if you remember, I was talking about the get the latest configuration manager updates, which we downloaded to this folder, right? So this folder, it is coming here. Hey, if you have internet, let me download directly from here, or if you have already previously downloaded, let me uh, browse that path, okay, and I will just validate it. Okay, I'm gonna click on the pre and just click next, so we can locate the previous downloaded folder. That's already there under D colon pre folder. Click on next, and if you remember, what happens is it actually verifies each of that file which are required. The required files are close to 14 of 14. There are close to 56, if I'm correct. Yeah, 56, but it's gonna require only 14 of 14, which is gonna revalidate it. How to validate, how to view this information is everything gets created under config mgr, setup.log, and the wizard.log. These are the two logs which will populate. If you see here, the file says what's changing. So if I just click on the wizard, this wizard says that cannot detect so and so. This is completely new server, right? We have not done earlier any of the setup. Let's open up the config mgr setup.log file. So it's gonna validate all these files which are under my under languages or whatever the folder which was downloaded from internet, from this wizard, right? We downloaded the latest updates from this wizard, which was validating the required all of them, and it says that, hey, I've already validated. Let's have a check. Okay, so it says that, hey, I've already finished. Now it's asking us to choose the language. These are the languages for the server-side the languages. So the config manager console for French guys, it can be in French. Okay, if you choose it as the French, it gets installed after downloading. Okay, and by default the media is in English because I downloaded it in English, so I'll simply continue with English. Similarly, the language for the client console, by the way, you have not seen the console as well as the client of interface. Let me show you how the SCCM console looks. Okay, SCCM console. Okay, this is the graphic. Okay, like if you look at here, it's more visible. This is a navigation, this is a workspace we call it, and this is a ribbon button, which is very similar to the SCCM or other system center products consoles. Okay, and that's it. And coming back to the other side of the view, this is very similar, but now SCCM console, which is for SCCM client console, how it looks like. So there is different consoles will be there, or the options. This would be the actually one of the applet in the control panel. This looks that, and all the components will be shown here. Similar to this, you can see here other one very similar to this, and these are the other config manager client applet. So I'm talking about this in this wizard. Actually, if you choose as again Danish, so what happens is for the Danish guys, this console, this client interface or client applet, okay, all this applet can be in a Danish if you have chosen this. So it all depends. If you really want to allow them to get it installed as a Danish, then obviously Danish can be taken as a checkbox. In our case, as English, because the media as well as I'm based out on English, so I'm choosing that. And this is the first and foremost, I would say, fast inputs which you need to decide what you're going to install. So in this case, there are two key points which are asking. As I said, site code. What is a site code? How do you represent, how do you call this SCCM server? So in my case, the deciding the site code factor, normally depends on few factors. For example, if this is my SCCM region, maybe for USA, so I would definitely call as USA here the site code. If this is maybe for Europe, I would say EU1. I'll simply say, hey, this is Europe 1. Maybe, in the Europe 2 west side, I may have another EU2 site. Similarly, it all depends how do you represent. Say, example, you can say as this is a primary site PO1. What if you have maybe 10 sites? In that case, you can say that, hey, I have a PO1, PO2, PO3 sites. Something like that. P stands for the primary site, and this represents the number. Okay. So the site code can be any of the deciding factor. Might be it will represent like primary or secondary with the starting, for example, PO1 or SO1. So here the SO1 always reports to the one side. If you have a SO2, it will represent to the here. But what if you have the 100 site, also you can have this site name. Okay, there's nothing stops that. You can have either primary site or the secondary site as this code. It doesn't matter. Okay, it all depends what you wanted to give a site code. In our case, I can give any of the site code, but in my lab I can give as a lab LAB or LA1, right? LO1, London 1. So in my case, I'm going to use as lab. Okay, and here the site name. So this name is the description. For example, here if you see here a Conteso headquarters site, that means this site may be easy to identify in the console where exactly the site is from, so that it's easy to more descriptive way, and you can easily find. All right, that would be the end. Okay, give me a second, I have to close this drawing. So I'm gonna give as LAB as a lab. I can't enter here other characters. I mean, not more than 3. I can give as LA1 if I want. Okay, or 101 or 10A. Okay, like I can give anything here, but it should be meaningful. Okay, and then it is more meaningful for me if I give as LAB, but the description would be lab site for demo. Okay, this would be, I can give as hyphen for India region. Okay, example, I can give like that. Okay, now here is a tricky part. So as part of any of the installations, okay, it definitely gets installed some folder, right? Similarly, SCCM also have a foldering structure. Starting from 2012, you have a naming and the folder structure would be a Microsoft Configuration Manager, which gets installed in the program files. Prior to 2012, you used to install under SMS folder. Anyway, now let's go and configure as a D drive. So I'll simply give this as the D. So under D program files, you can make a note that Microsoft Configuration Manager is the folder where it's going to install. So if I click on next, okay, it's going to ask me, hey, you selected as a primary site, that's good. Are you going to attach to any of the CAS site? You remember, we were talking about 2 sites, right? One is a central administration site and the primary site and a secondary site. So the primaries can repose to a secondary site. So for example, this may be a CAS site. Okay, so and if you're trying to install here as a PO1 or maybe a lab site, this is example. In this case, you want to attach to this site. If so, what is the site name? That's what the question which is asking here. I'm gonna give here, I don't have any of the site which has a CAS, so I'm not going to join anywhere or any of the hierarchy, because this is my first site. I've decided that I'm going to use as a standalone site. I don't want in future, if I want, I can always join to the CAS site. There is a possibility, but at this point of time, I'm going to install as a standalone primary site. So I'll choose this radio button, click on next, and it says that, hey, you have chosen as a standalone site. that's okay. You can expand all any SAM to attach to another hierarchy. Yeah, that's okay. Do you know that? Yes, I know. Now this is where the problem is. Okay, it says that if you have the SQL server, you have to enter the remote SQL server name. Okay, that's how only the difference. So in my case, it's a local, so I have given. In fact, it's automatically populated, right? And the default namespace, so I can leave this as the blank. So here we're gonna add this port 4022, which is SBR, which is service broker port, which is related to the SQL server, that must be added in the firewall. So I just go to the control panel, security and system, Windows firewall and Defender. It has been renamed now, right? So let's go to the advanced settings, and I simply allow new rule, which is port based 4022. Just double check the support 4022, right, and click next. Allow the connection in my domain, not to the private public, and say SBR related to SQL port. Okay, I've done. Also, I have to allow a port 1433 as part of the SQL communication. So I'll also give 1433, which is a port again on domain profile SQL server. So these are the ports which are required, which I'm gonna enable on my SCCM server. As the next step, I'll just close this since the rules are already there. Click on next. Now it's going to install in D drive with this with the server data file. So click on next, and if you see here, the SMS provider is getting installed. You remember that the most critical part, what we talked about, the WMI. On top of that WMI, whatever the SCCM is going to install, that's on SMS provider. So SMS provider is a key. That's why it is showing here even in the installation phase. Please choose SMS provider as default and clicking on next. And now as the part of the all site systems accepting HTTPS communication, that means you need to have the PKI, that's the certificates. Okay, if you have a certificate based communication, what happens is the SCCM client to the server, the communication would happen on a port ID, which is an HTTP. Okay, that's why we install as a pre-requirement as IIS, right? Other web services, so what we have installed. So if the communication should happen on a HTTPS, then you need to install the certificates. There are 3 certificates required. One for the client certificate, other one would be the server authentication certificate, and one more certificate would be the web certificate. Okay, these are the 3 certificates required. I'm going to talk on that, and if you enable if you have generated these certificates and you have converted your entire SCCM server to use as HTTPS, your SCCM clients, if they are not connected to your corporate network, when I say not connected, maybe they are just connected to internet, and even they don't have a VPN connectivity also, your clients can communicate with your SCCM server over the internet. So this is very useful if you're trying to manage any of the device which who are working on over the internet. Like, you can push the software, you can patch up, you can take the inventory, you can do most of the stuff over the internet. Okay, and that kind of communication, would we call it earlier, we used to call it as a native communication, also we call it as internet based communication, but it's a secure communication now. Okay, so this method, if you want to configure, you can choose as HTTPS. Later point you need to give all those certificates, but in our case we would go for HTTP communication, okay, by choosing the second radio button. And if the clients will have HTTPS, they use HTTP based communication. Otherwise they don't, they try to communicate on HTTP. That's how I'm going to choose it. But for now I'm simply choosing as the configure the communication method on each site system role. Clients will use HTTPS when they have a valid PK certificates, and HTTPS is if it is enabled for the SCCM server, then let's use it. Otherwise communicate on HTTP. Okay, that's how I'm going to configure. And in fact I'm going to do one more session on just an HTTPS. For now I'm clicking on next, and this is where it says that, hey, I'm going to install management point. Okay, so this management point and the distribution point, if you remember, these are the roles. As I said earlier, these are the core roles. These are very important roles. Okay, these are the minimum roles. You remember that we were talking about the roles. Here I also gave as MP and TB stands for management point role and distribution point role. Okay, like this you have 17 different roles which we talked about it, but each of these roles are meant for a different purpose. When I say different purpose, for example, reporting services point is used for generating reports. Okay, say example, you want to see the reports of how many users have maybe a specific hardware model, then you need to depend on a reports, right? So since we have installed SQL reporting services, but it was not as integrated fully with the SCCM server, so you have to configure your SQL reporting services to integrate with the SCCM server. To do that, you need to enable a role. So role is a kind of a feature which we talked earlier. Okay, so if you enable this role, the reports can be generated. If you enable software update point, you can do the patch management. Like this, each of these roles have its own features, or the key responsibilities, or key roles. That's why we call it as roles. Okay, and for now by default there are only few roles will be enabled. In fact I have listed here 17, but more than 17 will be there, like site system, site server role, like that. It will be listed in a minute, but for now we'll just continue with the management point and the DP, which are as a mandatory, it required for our lab to work. So I'm gonna choose as HTTP, both or an HTTP communication, these sites. Click on next. Now this is the new another role in the recent past, which was added as the connector, where you can communicate with. Basically it's like you're getting the inside console all the updates. To get that updates you need to have this role. Okay, this is the key role. Okay, you can skip it, or if you want you can add it. So in my case it's recommended because your configuration manager also up to date. Okay, for example you're installing in this case 1803, right? Let's see, you're going to install 1802, but what if since this is 19th 2019 and the March, if there is a release of 1903, you need to upgrade to that as the current branch. To get that updates, all you have to do is you will be getting the here console the updates. To get that you need to enable this role also, and this will make your configuration managed up to date. Okay, I'm not talking about the clients, I'm talking about the server component to up to date. Click on next, and these are the consolidated answers which we have as of now. Whatever the wizard was asked, all of them we put it here. Now what will happen is it actually starts when I click on next. It will start the pre-request which we have run it. You remember the tool which we run for more than 1 hour session, right? So that would run now. Okay, and it says whatever the errors or earlier reported, that all should report here. In fact before we installed, we ran that tool and we fixed all the required components like IAS, RDC, baits, SQL and ADK. All of the components we got installed, so it is met all the configuration except memory allocation, which is still pointing out. But we are sure that we have already configured properly this configuration, so we can ignore this because we are sure that, and we can begin install. So this would take some time, and you can click on the log, which is getting the installation log. So here it will throw if there is an error, otherwise you get the complete installation. Will take some time, maybe a 20 minutes to 30 minutes time. Once the installation is done, leave the console or leave that state maybe 15 to 30 minutes of time. That's what Microsoft recommends, because in the background other components gets installed. When I say components, SCCM is a combination of different components. Okay, all that components will gets installed. Okay, so it's trying to connect to the SQL. You got an error. That doesn't mean that it's really error. It's continuing further, because maybe if the error word was appearing, it simply shows you in a red color. That's what happened earlier. Okay, let's wait for some time to complete the entire installation. So let's try to connect in the between. If you look at here, is trying to create the SQL database and some of the tables, stored procedures, everything getting executed. If you wanna see what is happening, you can always go back to the SQL Management Studio and get connected and see what is happening. I mean, just the database. Click on connect, and you should be able to see here databases called CM_lab. So do you remember what is lab? Lab was given by ourselves as a site code. So what happens is when you install SCCM server, it creates a database with the site code of the site code what you have given, with the prefix of CM_. So CM_ site code is the code. Okay, and also let's go back to systems management container. Okay, you don't see anything here at this point of time, but let's see. More excited, right? If you are the first time, you might more excited. Hey, since I'm installing, do I see here? No, you don't see here right now. Once you install, as I said, SCCM has a lot of components, right? So all those components, I'm talking about a component called hierarchy manager. Okay, that's called a HMAN. Okay, hierarchy manager. Okay, so this component, when it is triggers, it will start creating here the required template gets filled up. Okay, and you can see that information. Okay, you have to wait for a minute. Okay, now it's gonna create anyway here the database tables, all those are getting getting installed. That's fine, and let's stick to the installation. Right, what is that? Don't worry about all that errors which are showing. It's not real errors. If you see here, this is the information that SQL Server script create object so and so, which has a word called error. That's why it is highlighted. Okay, don't be scared about all these lines. Okay, these, if something has error, that means it will highlight for you to give an attention. That's it. Okay, the same case for these three of them, right? Errors, right? That's fine. Let's continue the installation. This might take some time. It's already taken 6 minutes of time. I'm gonna pause this for some time so that it's gonna create all of other components, and then we should be ready with the installation. I mean the final installation to be completed. If you look at here, it's already completed the SQL related and copying files from source to the C colon program files. That's D colon program files config mcr. It started copying, and now if you look at little bit here, it's actually installing the SMS provider by compiling all these MOV files. Okay, which are already, because if you look at here in the top, it was copying for some time. Okay, the files from little bit up maybe. Yeah, if you look at here, even though from the pre2, it is started copying to the C colon program files, and then now post copying successfully, it is start compiling. Let me go down. It start compiling the MOV files, okay, which are used for creating the SMS provider. Okay, so there is no older version of provider, so it's gonna install the new, and all these MOV files are gonna compiled, with the MorphComp. If I have also shown you the WebM folder, inside that MorphComp folder, so it has compiled all of these, and then it is registering those required DLLs, and then it's continuing further. So by this time it should if it is already compilation is completed, it should go for other components to be installed. So I was talking about components. What exactly the components? You can see that monitoring component, server roles component, the policy component, inbox component. I will have to talk about inboxes also. I'm going to talk post to the installation how the actual server works. Okay, I'm going to talk on that very similar to the postman older days postman method. It does works. Okay, I'm going to show you that, but for now it's still installing the components. I'll wait for a minute. Once the installation is completed, I'll get it as a close button. Till the time I'll wait. Okay, it has took total 20 minutes of time, and it has installed. If you see here, you can close the wizard now, but if a little bit down, okay, these all are the components which are getting installed. So you can close this, that's okay, but in the background all these components are getting getting started, in fact. Okay, so it might take some time, so don't directly work on SCCM console straightforward by opening. To open the SCCM console, you can open from here directly, but don't work on immediate basis. Give it some time to the SCCM server. As per Microsoft documentation, if I correctly remember, it's at least talking about more than a 1 hour time, which needs to give for SCCM server to completely install all of the components. So in our case, I'm gonna leave for some time until all these components gets into green. Okay, don't be in a hurry. Okay, we wanted a perfect software to be installed in a perfect, all the components to be started. In fact, you can work on the console right away, but it's not going to start. For example, earlier I was talking about the hierarchy manager, right, which would take a which is responsible under this to create system management, under that to create this specific component. If I refresh, I'm getting it. Okay, this is not fully functional at this point of time. Okay, it's still doing its own work in the background. Okay, so that that kind of other components are still pending, like site control file, which is the single file CT4 file, which is the key. It's your complete configuration, like your answer file, your configuration file for SCCM server. So that all of them are still available, but it's not fully available. Okay, so we have to wait for some time. Okay, all together. So let's wait for some time. Like, I can close this and I'll wait for maybe a 30 minutes or so, and I'll come back and I'll open the SCCM console. Let me close this in front of you. Okay, and I'll open the console later point. Now it says that this is done already. Now I can come back later point. Maybe I'll leave for 30 minutes or so that all the components gets installed, and then I would work on the SCCM console with another video. Thank you.